The girl found a mail-order husband in barn and married him immediately against her father's will. The summer wind came slow across the ranch, soft as a sigh through brittle grass and the leaning fences. The sun had already tipped behind the western ridge, leaving the sky washed in lavender and dust. Edith Rose stood alone at the edge of the corral, the air rich with the scent of manure, hay, and something older, something aching, like time left too long in the sun. Her fingers were calloused from rope and shovel work, and her braid hung low against her spine, streaked with dirt and gold. She watched the horizon for no reason but habit. Her eyes narrowed beneath the brim of her father's old hat. The goats had been restless that evening, twitchy and strange. One kept bleeding toward the barn, not their usual complaint, but something more urgent, like a whisper turned fretful. Edith noticed it just as the light began to thin. She set down her pail of warm milk and wiped her hands on her skirt, letting her boots carry her slowly toward the shadows. Dust trailed her, curling like smoke around her ankles. The barn stood as it always had, battered, red-flaked, proud in its disrepair. It was her favorite place, truth be told. Not for comfort, but for silence. The loft window faced the east ridge, and in winter, the light there was softer, almost sacred. She had buried a kitten there once years ago. Her mother's rosary had gone missing that same week. She never told her father. She pushed open the door gently. The hinges groaned low like an old man's bones. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of hay and old sweat, animal musk and saddle leather. She stepped in slow, letting her eyes adjust. That's when she saw him. Curled in the farthest stall, behind the grain sacks, was a man, not a boy, not drunk, not fevered. Just still. His boots were dust-bitten and cracked. His coat was too heavy for the season and torn near the collar. His head rested against the wall, angled like he'd fallen asleep mid-thought. And in his hands, crumpled like a letter from a lost war, were papers, folded, stained, gripped tight. Edith did not startle. Instead, she stilled the way wild things do when they sense something unspoken passing between breaths. She took one step, then another, watching for the rise and fall of his chest. Alive, yes, but far from home. She considered going to fetch her father, but he'd shoot first and ask later. Her father had grown brittle since her mother died, like the old fruit trees out back. Once sweet, now sour to the root. Trust had dried in him. So Edith did what her mother might have done. She fetched the tin cup from the shelf, filled it from the pump, and brought it back with a hunk of bread. She didn't wake him, just set them beside his sleeping form and leaned against the post, watching. He wasn't handsome, not in the dime novel sense. His face was sun-worn, the jaw shadowed in uneven stubble, lips cracked from thirst. But there was something honest in the angle of his shoulders, the way his boots were placed side by side like he still cared about neatness, even in hiding. That alone softened something in her chest. Outside, a hawk cried over the gulch. The goats settled. The air turned blue with twilight. She sat down, knees to her chest, and listened to the rhythm of his breath. There was something profoundly sad in it, like a song without words. She wondered what kind of man slept in barns with letters clutched like prayer. By the time the sky went dark, the oil lamp in her father's window blinked out. She didn't stir. Her body ached from the day, but her heart kept tugging at her to stay. He might wake hungry, or scared, or angry. She wasn't sure which would be worse. When he finally stirred, it was near midnight. His hands twitched first, then his eyes opened, slow and unsure. He blinked like he wasn't certain what world he'd landed in. His gaze found hers in the dark. She didn't move. Neither did he. They stared, moonlight threading between them. "You hungry?" she asked, voice low as cotton. He looked down at the bread, at the cup, then back at her. A nod. Hesitant, but there. She watched him take slow bites, careful not to eat too fast, like he'd gone long without kindness. She didn't ask questions. She just waited. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve and set the tin cup down gently. Didn't mean to trespass. His voice was hoarse, edged with the Midwest. Not polished, not dangerous. Just worn. "You weren't hurting anything, Edith said. Barn gets lonely anyhow. He smiled at that, not wide, not bright. Just a flicker of something human. You live here? She nodded. With my father. Just us since Mama passed. He looked down at his hands. They were strong but tired. Fingers nicked with small scars. Working hands. Didn't plan to end up here. Didn't plan to find someone in my hay, either. His smile came again, truer this time. He shifted, wincing as his back cracked. Name's August. She rolled the name on her tongue, silently. It fit him somehow. Like thunder in summer. Edith. They said nothing for a long stretch. The barn settled around them, creaking in the breeze. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. The man, August, glanced at the letters in his lap. He didn't offer explanation, and she didn't ask. Some wounds don't like daylight. You from around here? She said finally. No. Meant to be in Nevada. Carson City, Rosebe. Had a letter. A woman. Said she was looking for someone to help her settle land. Never met her. She stopped writing. Edith felt a pang she didn't expect. Not jealousy. Just the echo of being forgotten. She sounds like a fool, she said, eyes steady on him. He didn't answer, but the way his shoulders relaxed told her that Rosebe he'd been carrying more than he let on. They sat like that, both staring toward the door, where the moonlight had pooled like spilled milk. It felt like sitting inside a story half-finished. Edith didn't know what would happen come dawn. She didn't know what her father would say or what August might decide. But for now, the quiet between them was enough. And Rosebe, that was the strangest part. How natural it felt. This silence shared between two strangers, both drifting through the empty places people left behind. She stood at last, brushing straw from her skirt. He made no move to stop her, just watched. If you're still here in the morning, she said, you can help me with the fence. Storm knocked it crooked. August nodded once, slow and solemn. Thank you. She paused at the door. Looked back once. Don't thank me yet. My father's got a shotgun and a temper. I've had worse, he said. But the smile was grateful, not careless. Edith stepped into the night. The stars above her were sharp and many. The wind had shifted. Smelled like change. She didn't know if it was the kind to break things or build them. All she knew was that someone had wandered into her barn like a question, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't mind not having an answer. The door clicked shut behind her, and the night held its breath. Morning crept over the plains with the hush of a prayer half-whispered. The sky turned the color of a bruise healing, lavender fading into peach, while the low hills wore mist like shawls over their shoulders. Edith rose before the rooster, as she always did, moving through the house with the quiet grace of habit. The kettle steamed. The bread from last night had gone hard at the edges, but she sliced it anyway. Her father still hadn't stirred. She reckoned he hadn't noticed the visitor yet. He was never one for barns, unless something was broken or dying. She brought an extra tin cup with her this time. August was awake when she arrived, seated on the low beam where the loft ladder met the ground. His coat was off, revealing a shirt patched more than twice, the fabric threadbare at the elbows. He stood when he saw her, not as a gentleman might, but as a man raised on quiet decency. Didn't think you'd come back, he said. I told you there's a fence needs mending. She handed him the cup, steam curling between their fingers. Can't do alone. He drank slowly, the way a man does who hasn't always had second chances. I ain't planning on staying long. Edith gave a shrug, half-hearted. No one ever does. They worked side by side most of the morning. No words at first, just the rhythm of labor, the give and groan of wood, the metallic bite of nails. August moved like someone used to doing more than his share, steady and silent. Edith noticed the way he studied things before fixing them, as if understanding the wound mattered more than the solution. It made her respect him. When they paused for water, she asked, "So what happened with that woman?" He wiped his brow, leaned against the post, and squinted at the rising sun. She answered one letter. Rosebe 2. We were supposed to meet come spring, start a homestead near the Washoe foothills. I packed everything I owned in one bag and walked halfway there. Never heard another word. Edith leaned against the fence opposite him, arms folded. You carry her letters still? He reached into his coat pocket, slow and careful, and pulled out the folded papers. The edges were worn, ink faded. He didn't hand them over, just looked at them. She said she had a mule named Clementine and a porch that faced the west. She sounded lonely. I thought Rosebe she needed someone like me. And now? Edith asked. He tucked the letters back into his coat. Now I think Rosebe I needed someone like her. That quiet honesty made Edith's throat tighten. Not out of pity, but recognition. She didn't tell him about her own letters, the ones she never sent. Words written and hidden in a drawer, meant for no one but the future she wasn't sure she'd ever see. By midday, her father came out. He stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, his shadow long behind him. A hard man, tall in a way that made others straighten. His grief had calcified into something mean, brittle. He didn't call out, just watched them both. Edith felt the weight of his gaze, the judgment in it. But she didn't flinch. When she finally walked over to meet him, August stayed behind, head bowed, respectful. Who is he? Her father asked, voice flat. Name's August. He was passing through. Her father's eyes narrowed. And you let him sleep in our barn. He wasn't hurting anything. He helped with the fence. I don't care if he rebuilt the house. He doesn't belong here. Edith's jaw tightened. Rosebe, neither do I then. That silenced him for a beat. His eyes flicked toward the barn, then back to her. You think because you're grown, you can bring any drifter into this place. He's not just a drifter, she said. He's decent. You don't know him. I know he didn't take a thing. I know he fixed what you didn't. I know he listened when I spoke. Her father's voice dropped. You think that means something? Listening? That's easy in the beginning. Edith's gaze didn't waver. It's more than I've had in years. For a moment, her father looked like he might speak again. But he didn't. He turned, walked back to the house, and let the door slam behind him. That night, Edith brought supper to the barn. Biscuits and stewed beans. Nothing fancy, but warm. August ate beside her in silence, both of them leaning against a hay bale, feet stretched toward the open barn doors. You don't have to stay, she said finally. He wiped his hands. I don't reckon I've got anywhere better. They sat in the hush between crickets and stars. Edith looked over. Why were you looking for a mail-order bride? He didn't answer right away. Then, because I got tired of being a man people pass by. I don't talk loud. Don't fight. Never could charm a room. But I work hard. I thought Rosebe someone out there wanted something steady. Someone who stays. Edith felt the ache in that. Rosebe, she's still out there, she offered. I don't think she is. They both knew he didn't mean the woman from the letters. Later, as she gathered the dishes, she asked, what would you have done if she'd answered? Married her. Built a house with a porch facing west. Raised chickens, Rosebe a dog. Given her quiet. Edith didn't answer. But she thought of her mother's apron still folded in the cupboard. Of her father's silence. Of the way this land seemed to demand everything and give nothing back unless begged. The next morning, August had packed his things. Not out of rudeness, more like resignation. Edith found him standing by the gate, bag slung over one shoulder. You leaving? He nodded. Your father doesn't want me here. That's not your fault. Doesn't make it untrue. She looked down at the dirt between them. You could stay until Sunday. Help me with the trough. It's cracked again. He hesitated. I've got no porch, she said, half smiling. But I do have quiet. That stopped him. I came here by accident, he said. I think, Rosebe, I didn't find you by accident, she replied. He looked at her then, long and steady, like he was seeing her for the first time. Not just the daughter of the man who'd lost too much, but a woman standing in her own stillness, offering nothing but truth. Sunday, then, he said softly. And he set his bag down. Just for now. Edith didn't know where this would lead. She didn't dare call it fate. But in a world where so much was loud and cruel and fast, she felt something worth holding in the spaces where neither of them spoke. The sun crested over the ridge as they walked back to the barn. August reached for the gate. She reached it too, and their hands met on the latch. They didn't speak of it, but it stayed. The rain began before midnight, soft, steady, and welcome after weeks of brittle skies. It tapped against the tin roof of the barn like quiet fingers drumming an old lullaby, washing dust from the wood, the grass, the skin of the world itself. Edith sat inside with a lantern burning low, flames swaying gently with each shift in the wind. August sat nearby, cross-legged on an old wool blanket, his shoulders damp from where he'd worked to cover the northern stalls with tarp. They hadn't spoken in a while, but silence no longer sat awkward between them. It filled the space like breath between two bodies unafraid to be still. Edith watched the rain fall in sheets just past the barn doors, the sky turning shades of deep indigo and ink. It reminded her of the nights she used to crawl into her mother's bed, not for fear, but comfort. Her mother had always said storms were God's way of washing what people couldn't. Edith wasn't sure she believed it, but tonight it felt like something old was loosening in her bones. "You ever get tired of running?" she asked, her voice low, barely heard over the patter. August looked up, thoughtful. "I don't run," he said. "I drift, like a log on a river that ain't picked ashore yet." She turned to look at him fully. The lantern light caught the edges of his face, his jaw shadowed in soft stubble, his eyes heavy but kind. He looked like a man who had learned how to carry disappointment without bitterness, how to stay even when staying hurt. "You could choose this shore," she said after a pause. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and took out the letters. This time, he offered them to her. Edith took them carefully, as if they might fall apart in her hands. The ink was faded, the word simple. No poetry, just honesty. The woman, Louisa, her name had been, spoke of a small farm with 2 mules, a sick sister, a dream of laying down roots. She never answered after the 3rd letter. August said quietly, "I still don't know if she died, or changed her mind, or just got tired of hoping." "You came all this way with no promise?" He shrugged. "Wasn't about the promise. Was about the chance." Edith looked down at the letters again. She thought of all the chances she'd been too afraid to take, all the times she'd stayed behind because someone had to. She handed them back. "Rosebe, she needed something else." Or "Rosebe, you were meant to give that chance to someone who'd take it." August didn't speak, just folded the papers slowly and slipped them away like memories returned to their drawer. The rain deepened. Outside, thunder rolled far off, low and thoughtful. Inside, the warmth of the lantern seemed to wrap around them like a quilt. Edith shifted closer. "My father will never give you his blessing," she said. August met her eyes. "I'm not asking for it. You'll need it if you stay. I'll need you more." The quiet that followed was not empty. It was rich with unspoken truth, thick with the weight of what they both already knew, but had not dared say. Edith felt it in her chest, the slow bloom of something that wasn't quite love, not yet, but was certainly kin to it. She looked away, her fingers curled around the hem of her dress. "Do you want to marry me, August Reed?" He didn't blink, didn't flinch. He only breathed once, deep and steady, and answered, "Yes." There was no gasp, no lightning strike, just the soft rush of something inevitable settling into place. "I don't have a preacher," she said. "I don't have a ring." Edith stood and walked across the barn to a dusty shelf. She reached behind the tins of nails and rusted bridle bits and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside it, wrapped in yellowed linen, was a simple silver band. Her mother's, tarnished, worn, but whole. She returned, holding it out. August took it without ceremony, his thumb brushing over the metal as though reading its past. Then he set it down and stood to face her. There were no vows prepared, no witnesses, but the storm and the loft owl blinking high above. And yet, something sacred moved in the hush. Edith cleared her throat. "I want a life that's mine. Quiet. Real. With someone who doesn't leave when the wind changes. I want a place where I'm not passing through. A name that means something. A home that doesn't vanish when I close my eyes." They stood so close the lantern's light touched both their faces. August picked up the ring and held her hand with care, as if she were made of something rare. "I'd marry you 10 times if you asked," he whispered. "But once is all I need." He slid the ring onto her finger. It was loose, but she would wrap a string around the inside later. It wasn't about fit. It was about staying. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to hers. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just a quiet union of two people deciding not to be alone anymore. Outside, the storm began to ease. But peace didn't last long. The barn door slammed open with a burst of wind and boot steps hard on wood. Her father stood there, soaked from the rain, eyes burning. He held no shotgun, but the weight of his fury was heavy enough. "What the hell's going on?" he demanded. Edith stepped between him and August without hesitation. "We married." Her father's jaw twitched. "You what?" "We spoke vows. I gave him Mama's ring." "You think that makes it real?" "I think it makes it mine." He looked past her to August, who didn't move, didn't lower his eyes. "You think I'll let some wandering fool lay claim to my daughter?" August answered, voice steady. "I'm not laying claim. She chose me." Edith's father advanced a step. "You think that matters? Choice don't keep food on the table. It don't mend a fence or hold a roof." "I've mended your fence," August replied calmly. "I've done more in 3 days than most men do in a season. Not because I had to. Because she asked." The silence that followed was jagged. Edith looked her father dead in the eye. "I'm not a girl anymore. You taught me how to shoot straight, how to gut a hog, how to survive. Now I'm surviving on my own terms." "You're making a mistake," he muttered, voice low and cracking. "Rosebe. But it'll be mine." Her father looked at her then, not the defiant child he once barked orders to, but a woman full-grown, storm-eyed and unshaking. Something inside him seemed to fold. He turned without another word and walked out into the dark. The barn was quiet again, save for the soft spatter of the storm's end. August stepped close. His hand found hers. "Still sure?" he asked. Edith looked down at the ring. "Yes." They spent the rest of the night in the loft, curled beneath an old wool blanket, not out of desire, but warmth. August never crossed the space between them without her invitation. And when she did shift closer, resting her head against his shoulder, he simply breathed her in like morning. She fell asleep to the rhythm of rainwater dripping from eaves and the soft beat of his heart beneath her ear. Before dawn, Edith woke to the scent of damp earth and the faint creak of the windmill turning again. She looked down and saw her father, standing at the barn door. He wasn't holding a weapon, only a bucket of nails and a hammer. He looked up, nodded once. Then he set to work on the eastern stall, the one that always leaned just slightly wrong. August stirred beside her. She touched his arm, and he opened his eyes slowly, warmth blooming behind the sleep. "He's fixing something," she whispered. August sat up, peered down, and gave a quiet nod. "Rosebe, we're all mending," she added. He didn't speak, just reached for her hand and held it in the blue light of morning. And though no one said it aloud, Edith knew something had shifted, not just in her father's spine or the barn's beams, but in the way the day arrived. Not with thunder, but with steady light. With a kind of beginning that doesn't ask for applause, only courage. And she had plenty of that now. Morning unfolded like a hymn unsung, soft and reverent, painting the sky with shy light that shimmered over puddled earth and newly mended fences. The storm had passed, and in its place was a silence not empty, but full, the kind of quiet that held breath, memory, promise. Edith woke to the scent of wet hay and wood smoke, the barn still creaking from the night's rain. Beside her, August stirred but didn't open his eyes. His chest rose in steady rhythm, the line of his brow smoothed by rest. She watched him for a moment, allowing herself the gift of stillness. He looked younger in sleep, or Rosebe, just less burdened. Edith rose carefully, bare feet brushing cool wood, and stepped down the loft ladder. Her hands traced the rungs like they were familiar prayers. The main floor glowed with early light, and the door to the barn hung open. Outside, her father's shape stood under the broken cottonwood, hammer in hand, fitting planks to a leaning rail. She didn't call out, just stepped beside him and handed him a nail. He took it without looking. "Didn't fix itself," he said. "No," she agreed. "Things don't." They worked for a while like that, two stubborn bodies mending what had cracked. The rhythm returned, old but changed, like a song played slower. "He's not what I pictured for you," her father said finally, not accusing, just stating. "I didn't picture anyone," she replied. "I just knew what I didn't want." He nodded once, as if that made a kind of sense to him. The silence stretched, then snapped as he muttered, "Your mother would have liked him." Edith looked over, startled by the softness in his voice. "Why?" she asked. "Because he looks at you like you're enough." That truth landed heavy in her chest, but it didn't hurt. Later, after the fence stood straight again, August joined her in the yard. He'd cleaned up, shaved with the rusted blade they kept above the trough, and looked like a man not trying to impress anyone, just trying to show up. His hands were red from soap and scrubbing. Edith offered him a biscuit and a smile. He took both gently. Eli wandered by near noon, the neighbor boy with eyes too big for his face and a gap between his front teeth. He leaned on the gate, grinning like he'd stumbled on a secret. "He yours now, Miss Edith?" he asked, jerking a thumb toward August. Edith raised a brow. "Depends what you mean." Eli shrugged. "He's fixin' things. Most men don't fix what they don't plan on keepin' it." August chuckled softly. "Smart kid." "He is," Edith said. "Too smart." Eli scratched his head. "Ma says you're brave." She said it real quiet, but I heard. "She said you did what most folks don't dare. Chose someone without waitin' for someone to tell you you could." Edith's cheeks warmed. She hadn't thought herself brave, just tired of waiting. Eli left not long after, kicking dust as he went. The day stretched long, slow, and golden. Edith and August worked side by side, tending to the goats, clearing out the feed bins. She taught him how to spot which goat was about to birth early, it's in the hips, she said, and the way she stops eating. He listened like every word mattered. He showed her how to brace a beam without splitting it, how to oil the hinges without pulling them off. That night, they sat beneath the stars, backs against the barn wall, sharing a slice of leftover cornbread. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he didn't speak. He just let her be. Edith thought about all the men who would have tried to fill the silence with stories, with pride, with plans. August offered only presence. And presence, she was learning, was its own kind of love. The days slipped forward like pages turning slow. One afternoon, she found the old wedding dress, her mother's, folded neatly on her bed. Clean, pressed, not a word attached. But the gesture said what her father couldn't. She touched the lace softly, fingers brushing memories. Then she packed away in a cedar box, not to wear, but to keep. She had no need for ceremony. She already wore the ring. August never spoke of leaving again. Not once. He kept working, kept showing up in small ways. The trough always filled before dawn, the woodpile never empty. When her father caught a fever after a cold ride to the post station, August was the one who sat up at night with him, wiping his brow, reading from the old journal they found in the loft. He didn't read well, but he read steady, like it mattered. Edith watched him from the doorway, heart full and aching. "He yours now," her father rasped one night, voice thin. She smiled. "No, I'm his. That's the difference." As autumn crept near, gold began to thread through the grass, and the trees whispered of change. August took Edith riding one evening, an old trail behind the ridge that overlooked the whole valley. They sat on a ledge where the rock crumbled beneath their boots, and the sky stretched wide enough to swallow silence. "I never thought I'd be here," he said. "Here with me?" Here wanted. She reached for his hand and held it tight. "You've always been worthy. You just had to stop walking long enough for someone to show you." He kissed her then, not with hunger or haste, but with reverence, like she was something made of breath and longing, like he'd waited his whole life to be gentle. They stayed on that ridge until the light went soft and the stars began to blink awake. When they returned, they found her father sitting on the porch, carving something from cedar. He didn't speak, just held up the shape when they approached, a horseshoe, sanded smooth, worn with age. "Your ma kept it above our door," he said. "For luck." Edith took it, the wood warm from his hands. "For strength," he added quietly. She didn't cry, though her throat tightened. Instead, she nodded and hung it above the barn door the next morning. Weeks passed. One morning, As she lit the stove and August fed the chickens, the sky darkened sudden and sharp. A neighbor rode hard into the yard, his face pale, voice cracking. "Fire," he gasped. "Over the ridge. Parker's barn. It's spreading." Without a word, August grabbed the pail and saddle. Edith followed, heart hammering. Fear not for the fire, but for the man she loved riding toward it. Her father came down from the porch, slower now, breath thinner, but eyes fierce. "I'm going too," he said. "You're not strong enough," Edith protested. He met her eyes. "But he is, and he shouldn't go alone." She watched them ride off, wind tearing at their coats. Courage stretched across the sky like a banner. And though fear gnawed at her, she knew something true. This was no longer a story of men saving things. It was a story of people showing up when it mattered. They returned hours later, covered in ash and smoke, weary to the bone. August's hands were blistered, her father's coughed deep. But the barn they'd fought for still stood. That night, Edith washed August's hands in a basin of warm water. He winced at the sting, but didn't pull away. "Worth it?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes rimmed with soot but bright beneath it. "For you always." She kissed the knuckles of each finger, and when he leaned into her, she let the weight of their shared life wrap around her like the night wind. They slept beneath the stars again, not for comfort, but because it felt like home. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried, not in warning, but in song. In the quiet that followed thunder, Edith found her peace, not in what she had, but in who she'd chosen. Not in approval, but in presence. Not in the promises of men who spoke loud, but in the steady love of one who stayed. And as the season turned, she felt the land shift with her, like even the earth had decided to begin again. The wind that morning came low and hot, curling under the eaves like it carried secrets. Edith felt it first while stringing the wash, her hands pausing on the line as the sheets flapped strange and restless. In the distance, the ridge line shimmered. Not with sun, something else. A haze. A warning. Her heart, that old wary thing, gave a quiet lurch. August stood near the trough, sleeves rolled to his elbows, skin tan from work. When he caught her gaze, he knew before she spoke. "Fire." "Could be. Smells like one." He didn't ask how she knew. She just did, like a rabbit sensing the hawk. She dropped the basket, already moving toward the barn. August followed without needing to speak. They'd built a rhythm now, forged from fences and silence, from days spent not just together, but aligned. Her father met them near the stable, the same place he'd once shouted down her choice. He didn't shout anymore. Instead, he looked to the wind, sniffed the air like an old wolf. "West Ridge," he muttered. "Same direction as Parker's land." Edith felt it deep, an echo of a last fire, the way it stripped everything but bone and breath. August touched her elbow. "I'll ride to warn them," he said. "We've got buckets and canvas." "In the shed," her father replied. "Go." August's horse was saddled and gone within minutes. Edith watched until he vanished, then turned to her father. "What do we do if it jumps the gulch?" He didn't hesitate. "We fight." And they did. By mid-morning, ash rode the sky like ghosts. The sun burned mean, copper hue. Edith soaked canvas and lined it over the barn doors. Her father dug trenches with a speed she hadn't seen in years. When she moved to help, he waved her off. "I dig," he grunted. "You save what's worth saving." So she ran to the house, grabbed the photograph of her mother, the tin of letters she kept beneath the floorboard, the wedding ring she still slipped off to scrub the pans. By the time August returned, soot streaked his face, and his shirt clung to him, damp and dark. They need help clearing a path. If it sweeps the ravine, the whole west side's gone. "I'll go," Edith's father said. No, August stood firm. "You're not strong enough. I'm not dead yet." "I wasn't saying you were." Edith stepped between them. "We go together," she said. "All of us. It's not just fire on the land. It's fire between us if we don't learn how to stand as one." They left the house empty, doors unlatched, curtains drawn wide like open eyes. On the ridge, smoke pulsed like a heartbeat. Trees cracked and screamed as the flames roared closer. It wasn't the wind's fault, nor the droughts. It was simply nature remembering its rage. They joined the other ranchers with shovels and rakes, beating back ember and flame. Edith worked with blistered hands, each swing of her tool fueled by something more than fear. She saw August across the field, his hat lost, hair soaked, eyes searching only for her between each breath. When they caught one another's gaze, there was no panic, only clarity, as if they were two flints striking purpose. Then the fire changed. A shift in wind. A roar from the canyon. It leapt with a sudden fury across the trench. Edith's father shouted, "Barn. It's headed for the horses." August turned, already running. Edith followed. They reached the Parker barn as the first sparks landed. The door was jammed. August rammed it with his shoulder, breaking the latch. Inside, two horses screamed, eyes rolling. Edith rushed in, rope in hand, tossing a halter over the mare. The heat swelled behind her, curling into her lungs. August grabbed the other horse, guiding it backward through smoke. The world narrowed to hoofbeats, heat, and will. Outside, they loosed the animals, sending them galloping blind toward the creek. But Edith's father wasn't behind them. She spun. "Where is he?" August turned. He was right there. The roof groaned. "No," she said, heart sinking. She ran back, lungs clawing for air. The barn's edge flared. The smoke swirled thick, the heat alive. She spotted him through the haze, collapsed near a beam, his arm pinned, blood staining his shirt. Time fractured. She reached him, dropping to her knees. "Papa." Her voice broke. He opened one eye. "You stubborn girl. I told you to go." She heaved against the beam. Nothing. Then August was there. Together, they lifted. Pain split Edith's hands. August grunted, muscles trembling. The beam shifted just enough. Her father groaned as Edith dragged him free. Flames licked closer. They pulled him clear just as the roof gave. Behind them, fire swallowed the barn hole. On the creek bank, August held Edith's shaking body while her father coughed and wheezed on the grass, alive but scorched. Others gathered, pouring water over wounds, praising miracles. Edith didn't speak for a long while. When she finally looked at August, her voice was raw. "You stayed." His reply was simple. "Always." Her father raised his head, barely, and rasped, "You've got more fight in you than I ever had." "No," Edith said. "You taught me to fight. August taught me when to stay standing." That night, smoke hung in the valley like an old regret. The stars returned, faint behind the soot. Edith sat with her father, his head resting against her shoulder. "You love him," he said. "I do. He'll break one day. Men always do." She nodded. "Then I'll help him mend." He chuckled weakly. "Your mama would have said the same." A long pause passed between them. "I was wrong," he added. "Not about being careful, but about what makes a man worthy." "He doesn't carry me," Edith said. "He walks beside me. That's enough." They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Later, Edith found August near the barn ruins, gazing at what was lost. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You saved him," she said. "I did it for you." "I know." He turned in her arms. The wind ruffled his shirt, carried the scent of ash and pine. She looked into his face, not the face of a hero or a savior, but of a man who'd once wandered into a barn with nothing and had become the shelter she never dare hope for. "I never believed in destiny," he said. "Neither did I. But I believe in what we've made." She kissed him there, slow and true, her hands cupping the nape of his neck. Around them, fireflies flickered. The night was no longer angry, just quiet, healing. Days later, the neighbors gathered to raise what had burned. Wood replaced what was lost, but something deeper had settled. Respect. Edith's father passed the horseshoe to August without a word. He hung it above the new barn door. And on that first Sunday, with dust still thick in the fields, Edith stood in the doorway of a home they were rebuilding. Hair windblown, sleeves rolled, ring glinting faint in the sun. August joined her, fingers brushing hers. They didn't speak of vows. They'd already lived them. As the wind stirred once more through the wheat and the cottonwood trees whispered low, Edith looked out at the land she knew would never be easy, and smiled. Not every story begins in fire, but sometimes that's how you know it was worth surviving. If you've ever felt unwanted, unheard, or overlooked, remember Edith. Remember the girl who chose to marry not for safety, but for shared strength. Remember that sometimes the barn isn't just shelter. It's where two souls find each other, sleeping quietly in the ruins of their own stories, and begin again. Because love, real love, doesn't arrive like thunder. It stays after the storm,